So thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for inviting Genova Diagnostics to be part of this, this virtual conference. Today, I'm going to be talking about our organic acids report. It is a nutritional assessment. So first of all, to answer the question, what are organic acids? So in the body, there are many multiples of biochemical reactions occurring at all times. And the organic acids report is looking at how smoothly these biochemical pathways are progressing. And we do that by measuring the intermediate metabolites along the pathway. And we're assessing for cofactor needs along the pathway to ensure the smooth progression of the pathway. And so another question could be who or what patients could potentially benefit from a nutritional assessment, such as the organic acids. And a patient presentation might be with fatigue, chronic stress, chronic inflammation, mood disorders, sleep disturbance, digestive issues or hormonal imbalance. But it could also be for people or for patients that you suspect have, poor nutrition, or it may be for people who are interested in optimizing their nutritional status for athletic gains or other things like that. So here on the first page of the organic acids report, so we have, it's a broad overview of functional imbalances in need of nutritional support. And here we have three broad categories. We have the the assessment of mitochondrial dysfunction, the assessment for toxic exposure, as well as looking at the need for methylation support. Now, underneath each score, we have the individual biomarkers that are taken into account when coming up with the scores. And beside each biomarker, we have an icon. So if it's a green dot, it means that the finding was within normal reference range. Then we have up and down arrows. If it's yellow, it means that the finding was at the high or low end of reference range. And if it's red, it means that it was high or low outside of reference range. So on the next page, we have a nutrient need overview. And these are findings based solely on the findings of this report. And it gives an indication for the need for these nutrients. And we have the categories of antioxidants, B vitamins, minerals, as well as the need for GI support. And the green is an indication for that there's a normal level of need for that nutrient. In the yellow, we've got a moderate level of need for that nutrient. And in the red, we've got a high level of need for that nutrient. In the suggested recommendations column, these are generated via algorithm from the findings of this report, and they are the suggestions from Genova for the levels of these nutrients. And then, of course, we do have a blank column here, and that's for each clinician to be able to make their final recommendations of these nutrients based on everything that they know of the patient and their medical history. So on pages 3 through 6 of the report, we have the nutrients. Each nutrient is listed along with its level of need that we have here with the scoring. And then we have some very significant information about each nutrient with the bullet points, such as why the nutrient is important, the causes of deficiency, the symptoms of deficiency. And then the last bullet point emphasizes food sources for each nutrient. And at the bottom of these pages, there is a key letting you know what each nutrient or what each bullet point indicates. So then whenever we go on to page 7 of this report, we really start diving into the biochemistry. So this is our citric acid cycle, or our Krebs cycle. So it's the primary energy producing pathway for converting our fats, carbs, and protein into energy in the form of ATP. So here at the top on the left, so the preferred pathway for fats is to proceed through the carnitine fatty acid shuttle, and that's represented here by the blue sleeve, and then into the mitochondria, and then converted via beta oxidation into acetyl-CoA. Now, the less preferred pathway when that occurs, we have the byproducts of adipic and subic acid. And so whenever those are elevated, that lets us know that this primary pathway may not be working optimally. And so it could indicate a need for cofactors along the pathway here. And that would be your magnesium, your B2, and you could write in carnitine here as well. In the middle, we take a look at how carbohydrates are being metabolized into acetyl-CoA, and then proteins also break down and produce acetyl-CoA. So from acetyl-CoA, it can go here to the left and be processed and be metabolized through via ketogenesis, which creates ketone bodies. And the one that we measure here is beta hydroxybutyric acid. Now here we can see that it's circled in green, and that means that it's within normal reference range. But this can be elevated whenever there is certain nutrition plans. If there's a paleo diet or a keto diet, or if someone is fasting, as well as an elevation here too could indicate insulin and glucose dysregulation or prediabetes and diabetes. So from acetyl-CoA, it can also go into the citric acid cycle. Now, this is a dynamic pathway. And whenever we're looking at the intermediates here, we're mainly considering potential cofactor need along the pathway. And those are indicated by the blue arrow. So if there's an elevation, meaning that there's an issue with moving forward to the next metabolite, it could be that there is a need for these cofactors to be able to move forward. In this case, we're looking at iron and glutathione. But here in the pink bubble, we also have inhibitors that it may be possible that are stopping the progression along the pathway, and these are mainly your heavy metals. So whenever I see an elevation kind of across the board, like we see here with the citric acid cycle, really thinking about a couple of things. One could be, in general, a B vitamin need. It can also indicate some toxic exposure, specifically heavy metals, preventing the progression along the pathway, as well as just oxidative stress in general. So then here at the bottom of this page, we have the electron transport chain. So now byproducts from the citric acid cycle feed into the electron transport chain. And this is where we get the production of ATP, or the majority of the ATP from the cycle. Now, these little sunbursts here indicate that free radicals are actually created just in the processing of, as we go through the electron transport chain. And so therefore, it is very important to have a good amount of antioxidants on board so that these free radicals can be neutralized just in the process of the Krebs cycle here in the electron transport chain. So looking at the next page, more of our organic acid markers. Now, these are detected in urine. Now, this first section that is at the top on the left, we're looking at malabsorption dysbiosis markers. So whenever we see elevations here, we are, suspicious of some GI health issues going on: malabsorption, maldigestion, GI dysbiosis. Now, because these are detected in urine, this is an indirect look at what's going on in the GI tract. So whenever there's an elevation here, our recommendation would be to do a GI effect stool report, and that would give you the most direct look at the GI tract and how it's functioning, and especially how to affect the healing. Now, in general, these elevations here, these are usually, we see these, we're looking at how amino acids are being digested, absorbed, and processed. And when there's elevations, it's just an indication that they're not being very well absorbed and processed. But also in our support guide, which Genova provides extensive support materials for all of our reports, there is a chart listing where there are certain foods too that can affect these markers. And most of those are your phenol and your polyphenol type foods. And so that would be your dark color berries, but also green and black tea, olive oil, those kind of things can cause elevations here. Then we have our yeast and fungal dysbiosis markers. Now, D-arabinitol is a direct product from the Candida species. So whenever it's elevated, we are suspicious of some sort of Candida somewhere in the body. Again, this is detected in urine. And then the citramalic acid and the tartaric acid, those can be elevated when they're metabolites of yeast, and or they can be elevated when there's a significant intake of fruit wine and sugars as well. Now, this group here at the lower section on the left are cellular energy and mitochondrial markers. So we talked about these on the previous page. These are from the citric acid cycle page. Whenever we look at the top on the left, on the right-hand side, we have a vitamin marker section. And this first group is where we're looking at our branch chain catabolites. So these are from your branch chain amino acids. And whenever there are elevations here, in general, they do indicate a need for the B vitamins that are listed here, your B1, B2, B3, alpha lipoic acid. Next, we look at the methylation markers. So we're looking at how, if there's a need for folate and B12. So this first marker, FIGLU, if it's elevated, indicates a need for folate. And the methylmalonic acid, whenever it's elevated, indicates a need for B12. Now the next section are for the biotin markers, and this is actually B7. And so when we have elevations here for these markers, it is an indication for a need for B7. Now this next section, we're looking at neurotransmitter metabolites. Now, it is important to know that we're not measuring the neurotransmitters themselves. We are looking for cofactor need along the biochemical pathway. This first group is for your kynurenine pathway. Now, this whole pathway is very B6 dependent. So if there are elevations here, it is an indication for B6. And these are metabolites from the amino acid tryptophan as well. Next, we have our catecholamine markers. So these are derived from the amino acid tyrosine. And this pathway it's the same pathway for dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. And so whenever we see lows or highs here, they can be associated with certain signs and symptoms such as depression or mood disorder, sleep disturbance, fatigue. Elevations are usually associated more with a chronic adrenal stress response. The serotonin marker. So whenever we see elevations here, one thing that we are thinking about, and this too is a derivative of the tryptophan, the amino acid tryptophan. So when it's elevated, it can be an indication that the patient is taking an SSRI, or it can also be elevated when there's GI dysbiosis, because a good deal of serotonin is made in the GI tract. This next section, we're looking at toxin and detox markers. So the first metabolite here, the pyroglutamic acid, So this is it's an oxidative stress marker. It's an intermediate for the recycling of glutathione. Glutathione is a very powerful antioxidant in the body. And so whenever we see elevations here, we are thinking perhaps about supplementing with glutathione. But if we're actually seeing low numbers here, then we may be thinking more of supporting with the amino acid precursors for the glutathione, which would be cysteine, which is usually supplemented by NAC or N-acetylcysteine. The two other amino acids are glycine and glutamine, and support for the cofactor support includes magnesium and B6. Now, the next two markers indicate actual toxic exposure. This first one, the alpha ketophenyl acetic acid, indicates exposure to styrene, which is in many varnishes, but it's also in styrofoam and food containers and packing material as well. And then the next one indicates exposure to MTBE, which was a gasoline additive, but it has a very long half-life, and it does still show up in soil and water. So whenever these two are elevated, well, with the marker for MTBE especially, we're thinking about a water filtration system that will filter out MTBE for consumption and perhaps even for the home. But in general, thinking about antioxidant support and liver detox support as well. And this last marker here in this category, the orotic acid, is an indicator for liver oxidative stress. It can also, when it's elevated, it can also be indicative of a need for magnesium. And so this in general too is an indicator for antioxidants and your liver detox support. So here on the next page, we have our oxalate markers. And these in general are indicators. They can indicate oxidative stress. They can be indicators of metabolic dysfunction, chronic stress response. And then this last one, especially oxalic acid, whenever it's elevated, it can be an indicator or it's considered a risk factor for calcium oxalate kidney stones. Then here at the bottom of this page, we do have a couple of pathway charts that are supportive for the markers on the previous page, especially in the vitamin section. And then that is the extent of our organic acids report. Now, we do offer a more extensive nutritional assessment, and it's called our Metabolomics Report. And I'm going to switch to that screen here. So our Metabolomics Report, here on the first page, the design of it is and interpretation of it is very similar. But we do add two additional pillars considered for functional, for nutritional health. One is the oxidative stress pillar, and the other is our omega imbalance pillar. So while the organic acids report is for a urine sample, first morning void, so the base metabolomics report is also from a urine sample as well. Now, these first couple of pages have a very similar format as to the organic acids, where we have a nutrient need overview, as well as more detail about each of the specific nutrients and their level of need. And then it also includes all of the organic acid markers that we discussed, the citric acid cycle, as well as the organic acids page. Now, on this next page, an additional group that is included are these oxidative damage markers. So these are indicative of actual oxidative damage to tissues. So the lipid peroxides indicate actual oxidative damage to lipids, which means the phospholipid bilayer of cell membranes. So indicates damage to cell membranes. where the 8-OHDG, when it's elevated, it indicates actual oxidative damage to the DNA. So on the next page, we'll see an additional assessment here, and this is for amino acids, and these are detected in urine. This is from the first morning void. And so this would reflect the relative, the intake of the most recent meals. So in the past 24 to 48 hours is the assessment that we would see here. We look here at the essential amino acids. These are the ones that it's necessary to intake in our nutrition from our diet. And then we look at the non-essential amino acids, and these are converted from our essentials into the non-essentials, and we look at the levels there. We also look, there's also B vitamin markers that we're looking at, the urea cycle markers, glycine and serine metabolites, and then these dietary peptide related markers. These can give an indication of just the overall intake of the type of proteins that are coming in the nutrition, but also it can give an idea of how well those proteins are being metabolized or broken down into smaller pieces and parts. Then also so through the amino acids page is our base Metabolomics Plus report. That is, so it requires a urine collection, and then we have several add-ons. Now, the next group, this is an optional add-on. This is for our essential metabolic fatty acid markers. So here we are looking at, and this requires a blood spot. So just a blood spot sample for the assessment of these. We look at the omega-3 fatty acids, which we know are very important for inflammation, and also low levels are associated with increased cardiovascular risk. We look at our omega-9s, the saturated fats, the omega-6s, our monounsaturated fats. And then here we also have a section where we do look at the cardiovascular risk markers. And the one that we consider the most significant here is this omega-3 index. Anything less than 4 here is considered a high risk for a high cardiovascular risk. Between 4 and 8, it's a moderate risk, and greater than 8 is a low risk. And then the next page, we look to see that omega-3 and omega-6 metabolism, they share enzymes. And then whenever we look to see how well one is converting into the next, we can see how well these enzymes are functioning. And if there seems to be a kind of a block where one metabolite's not converting into the next, then we can look at how to support these specific enzymes with these regulators, most of them being B vitamins. And then here on page 13, another optional add-on is looking at elemental markers. So this again is detected in urine from first morning void. So this would be an indication of recent exposure to whether it's toxic elements. We look at all these different toxic elements, and then we also have nutrient elements that we assess here as well in the first morning void. So that's a look at one of our more comprehensive nutritional assessments, and that's called our Metabolomics Plus report. And again, Genova offers extensive support materials for all of our reports that they're referenced and with citations. So any questions I can help anyone with?
I think we have a couple of questions.
Okay. Let's see. I can see, let's see. I'm looking for, well, unfortunately, I am not able to read Spanish.
But I think at the end
but
of
I see one question here at the bottom where they're asking about, there's a marker elevated in gut dysbiosis, as well as if the patient is on SSRI in times of COVID where mental health where mental health, depression is on the rise. How would you differentiate this in a patient taking those SSRIs? Okay, so that's a great question. And really tying into clinical presentation. So anyone who has any sort of GI signs and symptoms, then that could be, I mean, that would be your indicator that an additional look at what's going on in the GI tract could be helpful. So gas and bloating, diarrhea, constipation, abdominal pain, even upper GI signs and symptoms like nausea, reflux, belching. And then it can be also intolerance to different foods as well. Like if someone is intolerant to fiber and fiber-rich foods, or intolerance to prebiotics or probiotics, all of those can be an indication that there may be something going on in the GI tract.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Smith, for your great presentation. How we can, okay, there is another one at the from Aris Rios. She asked how we can get tested in Panama. Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that question.
I had.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So you have to contact Nux Laboratory. Si nos contacta a través de Nux Laboratorio y con mucho gusto le damos la información de cómo puede realizar la prueba que ha explicado la doctora Smith. Yeah, through us, through Nux Laboratory. So thank you very much again, Dr. Smith. And if we have any more questions, I will send it to you. So because we're going to upload all the questions to all the presenters, and we will put it in our webpage. So thank you very much again, and have a great day.
Thank you. You as well. Everyone as well.